Could you just do a quick comparison for us between the annexation of Eastern Ukraine, Crimea, and Russia invading into Ukraine, as
Right,
opposed to Israel annexing parts of Syria and invading further into Syria and Lebanon?
right. Well, I think the most important thing is that, um, those territories, Crimea, is a special case because, of course, that was part of Russia. It was always part of the Soviet Union, of course, but it was part of Russia up until I believe it was 1957, 1958, when Khrushchev just decided to give it to Ukraine, which at that point was a part of the Soviet Union. So nobody was really terribly excited about it at that point. Um, but they have it's a very Russian, you know, area. They've always considered themselves Russians. All like 90, well over 95%. And when Russia annexed it, you can say after the Maidan coup in 2014, um, I guess an additional factor is actually Russia has a military base there, uh, extremely important to them, right? A naval base. Um, well, Russia held a referendum, and it was passed overwhelmingly, and it was something that was monitored by Western powers, and they had to admit that this was done fairly. It was something. It was like 95% or higher that said, "Hey, we want to be with Russia." And then something similar actually happened in the Donbass, which we're talking about Lugansk and Donetsk. They wanted to join just like Crimea did. And they made a request actually to the Kremlin, but Putin refused them. He was trying to work something out with the West, and through the Minsk Accords, but it never worked out. So it was back in 2022 that referenda were held in Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, and Kherson. The parts of Zaporozhye and Kherson. Well, none of these were entirely under Russian control, but those parts are under Russian control. And you got well over 90%, I believe, in Donetsk and Lugansk. It was like 85% in Kherson and Zaporozhye, saying, "Yeah, we want to join Russia." And it's not surprising. People have pointed out, and I think you have to admit they're right, that like a referendum that's held under military occupation like that during a time of war really isn't valid. But it does tell us something. It tells us something, I think, that people who know the region already knew, and that these are ethnically Russian areas that have a strong affinity, for Russia. So there's nothing surprising about these results. So, we're um, and of course, in the case especially of these four regions, it was not something that Russia was trying to do initially. They were doing everything to work out an arrangement where those territories, even though they are ethnically Russian, would remain a part of Ukraine. There were the Minsk Accords, but there was also this the Istanbul Agreement. That was a result of negotiations that immediately followed the SMO, and that too would have returned those regions. Actually against the wishes of the people there, but just because Russia, wanted to maintain good relations with the West and respected Ukraine's territorial integrity, that would have returned those regions to Ukrainian control. They just would have to respect minority rights and not become a part of NATO, and there are a couple of other things involved. Um, Now, in the case of Israel, they simply moved in and took this land, and these are not people. These are Arabs and Druze, and so I think it's a completely different thing. If they're going to, I think they're going to be there permanently. Actually, they are. They're already money has already been allocated by the Israeli government to promote settlements in the area. So they're going to do the same thing that they've done everywhere else, and they're going to ethnically cleanse it and replace the local people, with their own. And so it's a very completely different dynamic, you could say. The,
Mm. It, Won't Israel have a problem that they're going to run out of potential settlers? I mean, they're taking all this land and they're wanting to settle it. They're wanting to settle Gaza. They want to settle the West Bank. They want to settle
Yeah,
southern Lebanon, the Golan Heights. And over 1 million Jews is what we're hearing have already left Israel. It's like,
right.
where are these settlers? Like,
Well, they come from, actually, there's, again, the Jews that have left Israel, I think, are largely secular, Western-oriented Jews, and they have been a diminishing part of the Israeli population for decades now. They used to be the dominant group within Israel, but they no longer are. And one of the reasons that, there's immigration, but there's also just the fact that the kind of the right wing and generally religious Jews in Israel that the settlers draw from, that become future settlers, that they have a much higher fertility rate. There are a lot of the families have 10 children. It's actually very, very unusual within, you could say, for a white population. Because generally around the world, they like European descended people have, and Europeans have very low fertility rates, below replacement level. But that's not true in Israel. And it's not true of these people. So, yeah, they do have, there are settlers within Israel, they're very willing settlers, and there will be for the foreseeable future. Maybe they're not going to be able to populate these territories densely, but they'll be able to populate them.
that's going to create a real issue, though, for Israel as you have this population boom amongst the settler movement. A lot of secular Jews, maybe living in Tel Aviv, that are more close to the West, are probably going to be leaving, or they have fewer children. So you really have this concentration of extremism. I think one of the things that's maybe driving such high fertility rates is the idea that this is their mission. They're doomed to conquer the land. That we have to take this, and they know that the only way to do it is to have a lot of children, because there are not enough people that believe in Zionism that they can import around the world, that want to come here and engage in essentially what's a crusade, a holy war,
Yeah, no, I think that's an accurate analysis, yeah.
So that just means that what we'll see then, we've already talked about how after October 7th, Israel changed completely. But I think what we're seeing is even a greater shift, as well as the secular movement. People leave, and we have this higher concentration.
Right. Well, all these trends will just continue. These tendencies.
They're accelerating, is what you're telling me, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So that Israel is now truly an expansionist power, and you told me something.
It actually always has been. Let's be honest. And, when the secular people were in charge, they were just more careful about it. But they were expansionists too.
Right.
They
now openly
expansionist. Right, exactly. I mean, it's really those. I think those. Yeah, Zionism is expansionist, really, by definition. It is about taking the land, from other people for the Jews. And it began as a secular enterprise, and then gradually, and then let's say after the 6 Day War. It was, again, a largely secular army, or I think overwhelmingly secular army, that did that and seized those lands. But then the settlers, they already had these religious Zionists among them, and they were the ones who tended to go and settle the land. And there was some hand wringing, always was among the secular Zionists about it, but they let it happen. They clearly did, and because I think, when truth be told, they never ceased being expansionists. And so they simply used these people. But eventually these people that they were using to seize the land became the majority. And, they are now dictating policy. And they do things differently. They're all expansionists. They're all Zionists. But these people don't have any pretenses of being, of respecting Western values or whatever.